Monday, November 11th, 2024 at 7 p.m. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Mount Pleasant City Commission recognizes the Anishinaabe, whose ancestral lands the city stands upon today. We acknowledge the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe and recognize that the three bands of Ojibwe, Saginaw, Black River, and Swan Creek, have resided on this land for over 200 years. Our acknowledgement of the full history of the tribe and our commitment to be good stewards of these ancestral lands are an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those ancestors who came before us. We give thanks to the generous care with which the Anishinaabe and those members of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan have given and continue to give to this land and our community. Clerk Bauk, please take the roll.
Commissioner Bush?
Here.
Commissioner Chapman?
Here.
Commissioner Eke?
Here.
Commissioner Rollins is absent. Commissioner Wingard?
Here.
Vice Mayor Alsager?
Here.
Mayor Perschbacher?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Since we have a quorum, we will continue the meeting. We're going to first have a presentation by the Parks and Rec Director, Phil Biscorner.
Good evening. Bear with me, I got a little bit of a stuffiness going on, but this presentation today is to discuss Vites Woods and the trail going through it, and put a little timeline together. Just to put into perspective, I've only been here since 21, and so I know there's some things that happened before I got here. I put together what I think I know, so.
Okay.
So concept maps go back to 2011. Obviously, the one at 2011 was just to show the trail going all the way from Ithaca to Clare. In 2017, there was a concept map put together for the regional trail planning map. The red sections were not completed, but you can kind of see the red sections were what they were thinking. In 2022, while they were doing the preliminary design for the North Trail segment, we had the same group come in and do the South Trail segment while they were here, just to save a little bit of cost. Now, obviously, this is just preliminary drawings, so once we actually get into the general engineering and design, it'll be a lot more detailed. So the preliminary design in 2022, Beckett Rader, who was the company, provided a preliminary design to essentially connect Chippewatters to West Campus Drive. West Campus Drive is where the current south section stops. Oh, and this was actually presented to the City Commission on December 12th. It was part of a Spark grant application as well. These are just the preliminary drawings that were done by Beckett Rader. It starts at the north and goes to the south. The second one that says 2022 continued essentially stops at the current trail at Chippewatters. The main reason why we did that is because we already have a bridge connecting to the other side, and so that essentially cuts the total cost at least in half, if not more. As you're going down, you will see a dark spot on the right-hand side. That is actually a proposed boardwalk, because there's some low areas in there, and instead of filling it in, we would just do the boardwalk to keep it level. The one on the left comes out of Vites Woods onto Center Road, and then goes south on Crawford. Then you see on the right-hand side, it comes to the stoplight at Crawford and Brookfield, just so it's a safer crossing. And then it essentially crosses Crawford again to get over to the intramural athletic fields. And then it ends, and in this picture, there was still the Kiwan Village, so that has been torn down as well. This has been included in the CIP since 2020 that I can find. It's been in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, the current one. It's part of a regional trail, which I discussed earlier. The span is essentially from Ithaca to Clare, and the thought is that we would be able to connect the Fred Meyer Trail to the south to the Pierre Marquette Trail to the north. Right now, it currently spans from Shepherd to West Campus Drive in Broomfield. It has been supported by CMU and the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe since I've been here. Some considerations that we went over, community connectivity. Obviously, the best thing to do is to try to get the residents on the south a path to get all the way to the north without having to get in your car. After the next trail segment, which is scheduled to be done next year, you'll be able to go all the way up to Mission Creek Dog Park. Increased recreational opportunities, linking the parks through the trail system, walking, running, cycling, and even educational activities, which I'll go over a little bit more as we move along here. Economic development, it definitely attracts tourists and boosts local businesses as people come into the community just to be able to ride that trail segment. From an environmental educational standpoint, this is mostly in the discussions with CMU, and I'll get into a little bit more detail as we move along, but that's why that was a factor in there. Promotion of sustainable transportation, providing a safe and accessible route for walking and biking, encourages alternatives to car travel, reduces traffic congestion. Cumulative environmental impact. One path can have a manageable impact on the environmental degradation. Overdevelopment concerns. The vision of an extensive trail network might lead to increased development pressure, potentially harming the character of historic natural areas and their ecosystems. The main reason why we're looking at one trail instead of multiple trails is one, for access, but it's the least amount of degradation you can get by adding it. So visitor overcrowding. The appeal of a connected trail system might draw larger crowds to previously tranquil areas, impacting wildlife and the overall visitor experience to those spaces. There's not a whole lot of other reasons to go into the park other than from CMU's aspect, so the overcrowding was not really a huge concern in that discussion. Discussions with CMU. There was some discussions before the September 23, but they asked to wait until I provided them with that trail map, like the actual concept, so they could have something to go back with. City staff provided CMU with the proposed pathway. CMU gathered significant feedback from the staff. So I sat down with multiple stakeholders over at CMU. There was a pretty significant group put together, and President Davies is the one that put it all together. So it's not like we just talked to one person over there too. CMU approved proposal at Board of Trustees meeting in February of 2024. So in conclusion, while the integration of the asphalt path into a broader trail system offers significant community and recreational benefits, it's essential to weigh those benefits against potential environmental and historical impacts. Thoughtful planning and design can help mitigate risk while maximizing the positive aspects of such a project. It was determined that making Vites Woods accessible outweighed potential impacts of the trail. That is all that I have.
Commissioner Eke?
Okay, so
Please speak into your microphone.
I said it once, I think I might just swallow the microphone. So, I wouldn't have to worry about speaking into it. All right, thank you for this presentation. I asked to see this again because I didn't remember seeing it as an agenda item previously. And clearly, if it was part of a larger conversation, it's easy to miss that. So I appreciate you coming back here today, to, refresh our memory. And I appreciate the detail that you have provided. I have a couple of concerns. First of all, I'm going to ask, okay, let me deal with my concern and then I'll ask you a question. Is that okay? All right. I've got a couple of concerns. One has to do with, we at our last meeting, a number of residents who are within close proximity of Vites Woods, made a presentation to tell us about the history of the place. I walk that wood. I don't know. I see that CMU says they have talked to staff, and I'm assuming they talked to CMU staff. Chances are that those people don't live near that wood. So I walk that wood. The distance between the trail that exists there now, the path that might be opened up to connect to Center Drive, and the subdivisions, fences at the subdivisions on either side is less than 100 yards. I walk that trail. So now the question one is, did anybody even think of consulting the people who live around there? Because they are going to be disrupted. I'm not saying where I'm going with, whether or not I'm going to support this right now, but I am troubled because I walked it several times last week. I walk it practically every day. And I'm looking at the distance saying, so if you have bikers coming through here, what's going to happen to the people living there? And there are children, by the way, in families with children near where this trail comes out of Vites Woods. The other thing has to do with the implications. You said environmental, educational activities and environmental concerns. Well, educational activities are already happening there. I take my students there during the summer, and other people take students there. But we have been talking about protecting our green spaces or creating additional green spaces. And so it seems to me that one of the things that's going to happen is disrupting an already existing green space. I don't know how to reconcile that because for me it's a contradiction, okay? I don't know. Okay, I'm just gonna, you're talking about overdevelopment. So if that is opened up, what are the chances that the bikes that use the trail will be limited to just those ones with the two tiny wheels, as opposed to the fat ones? And maybe one of these days, somebody driving their Harley Davidson will not drive through there because it's an easy way to go from High Street to campus. I am worried about that. And then, so the question that I have for you is whether alternative design or alternative path was considered. Is this the only connection that we're thinking about? Two, what are the implications of, of our changing direction in terms of this particular trail? I realize that it's connected to grants, to a grant that we got, but if we decided not to develop, not to go through Vites Woods, what alternative do we have? What implications might that constitute for us? So I'm just going to stop there, and then hopefully if something else happens, I will ask additional questions because I have lots of questions here and I don't want to take over the whole thing.
So just to start, it's already a pathway. So there's already bikes going through there. There's already activity going through that part. This is not something that's new. People don't stop going there just because It's not paved.
Actually, I'm going to correct you. Bikes are not allowed into Vice Woods. That section that you're trying to open up, it's eroded. I know that trail because I walk it every day. Bikes are not allowed over there. And anybody who is using using their bikes in that section is not supposed to be doing that.
And I understand what you're saying, but I know from experience, I've been down that trail too. And there have been bikes out there. I've seen them. They use that as a connection that is currently there. So using that particular discussion, I guess, it's a little bit more difficult from my standpoint to say that there would be more or less or whatever, because we really don't know, so you don't know necessarily what the activity, but if you're talking about like four-wheelers or, something that's a little wider than a bike, we have poles in the middle they can't go through because there's fence on both sides and there's a pole in the middle of the pathway, which you can see over here at our entrances into Island Park. So that's how we regulate the size of bikes going through there, or vehicles, whatever. Right now, you could not get a golf cart outside of Island Park without taking the roadway.
I have a follow-up to that. Okay, take away the big carts. I am asking what type of bikes are we going to limit in terms of the usage of that
That's-
particular?
I
let's say
think that's a
hypothetically.
discussion later today.
That's
in
in
the-
our work session.
Okay, so you haven't answered the other question. Did anybody here even think about consulting the residents or people who might be impacted by this change of the neighborhood? Because it is going to change their neighborhood. I don't care, I don't want to say that I don't care. I really do care about what happens to these green. It's part of my campaign thing where I'm talking about the environment, the creation of green space. And here I am looking at this thinking, wait a minute, we're doing something that doesn't sit well with some of the things we have articulated in our goals. So and if we are representing our community or residents, did the city or even CMU consult the residents? I am just not happy about people saying to me they were not consulted.
It's been in the plans that there's been no direct contact with the local groups from my knowledge. That is CMU's property, so we have to listen to what they have to say as well.
Yeah, but we're the ones asking CMU to give us permission to use this space. I would think that as, the city too, we could have talked to people there to say, we're thinking of doing this. What are your feelings? What are you thinking? That's where I'm going with
Right.
this.
Well, in my defense too, like when we put this stuff in the CIPs and those things, that's where I have my marching orders. I go through and I do the projects that are on those plans and those items. So I'm proposing that this is the direction that we go through, just because it's the most cost effective too.
You haven't answered my other question, which is if we decided, what alternative paths or routes do we have? If hypothetically, say we decide not to go that way,
So-
and if we don't go that way, what happens to its connection to the grant?
So the reason why we chose that way is because we already have an existing bridge on the other side of Chippewater's Park. If we go to another location, there will have to be an additional bridge if we go anywhere to the west. If we go to the east and we go through already developed neighborhoods, there's not a whole lot of places where we can extend the sidewalks to 10 feet wide to meet the requirements.
That's not 10 feet.
This is 5 plus. I am 5 something. This is 5 plus another 5.
Yeah.
That's coming close to those fences that I'm talking about.
Vice Mayor?
You and I spoke once about this, and so I took some actions I wanted to make sure you knew about. I started at Chippewater, crossed the bridge, and I understand that's the bridge to be used. I came across one biker, and I commented to him, I don't think you're supposed to be riding your bike in here. And he said this little tiny loop past the bridge is what he does. And then he comes right back. He doesn't do a big loop, and he does some trail maintenance. So that was his rationale for doing that.
But that's our property.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that, yeah. So anyhow, and then I walked a little farther and saw one exit that led to a dirt road. I'm not sure what road that is.
It's the private, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it's the private trail on the west side of our border, essentially.
Okay. And then I walked a little farther and I saw something of the same type opening that's by the other neighborhood. You know, you can't get a bike through it. It's one of those. And it's at the back property of Community Church. So I've been having some initial conversations with a friend who rides her bike and a man who's on the board. And they're interested in perhaps us using their property to go around maybe their east and north boundaries and then connect so that we could avoid the neighbors to the east.
But you would still have to stay on the roadway, and you would impact a few houses on that side of it when you're going back to Crawford.
Yes. So there'd be some on Broomfield.
So basically what I was getting at is no matter which way we go, we will impact someone.
Right. Right. And I think as I used my GPS watch, it would be a half-mile paved from the bridge to that property from Community Church.
That's probably pretty accurate.
So I thought it might be worth investigating that.
Commissioner Chapman?
As a representative of our community, that's what my job is, to represent the community. And I don't make decisions based on my opinions, just based on my representation of the community. And so one of the questions I have is, you know, obviously, 2 weeks ago, we had a lot of concerns. And one of the things that I'm curious to know the answer to is what considerations have been made considering all of the history, like Maureen was talking about the relationship between Dow and CMU and how that could affect things in the future. I mean, have there been conversations about that property being purchased with that partnership to stay the way that it is forever? Has that ever been a conversation?
There was no conversation in that regard back to me from CMU.
Okay. I wonder if that should happen. I don't know the answer to it. That's for you to figure
Like I
out.
said, I mean, when we reached out to them, you know, they wanted to see the plans, and I gave them the plans, and then they put together their group and then sent everything back to me. I walked that trail several times with them, so during that process.
Commissioner Ake?
No, you can go with Weingart first.
Okay.
Wingard.
Wingard.
Let's see. Do you know about when construction's slated to begin? I know it's 2025 was the intention, my understanding?
Yeah, right now, we would be looking at 2027 based on grant funding. There is still significant grant funding that needs to happen in
2027.
order for us to finalize this trail.
Gotcha. And then also, yeah, just to go, give you a bit of credit here, Phil, and everything. As you pointed out and everything, this has been in front of us for a while. It's part of the capital improvement plan. We see a lot of stuff, and sometimes it doesn't get the focus and everything that residents who live right next to it call for. So residents called us up on it, so we're having the discussion. But you have been following the orders you've been getting there and everything. So now we're just reviewing that further and everything. So yeah. So the grant funding, the 20, that is involved in this development here, if we were to make a change, like let's say like we found a different route and everything, let's say, is that going to mean that you'd have to reapply for that grant funding, or is
We're
that?
going to have to apply. We don't have currently any grant funding. We did
Oh,
not
gotcha.
we did not get the grant that we applied for through the Spark grant for that trail. All of our funding so far is for the north section that's essentially going to connect Nelson
okay, gotcha.
to Mission Creek.
I was thinking of the 200,000 that was for.
No,
the north.
that's another part for that trail.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So that answers that question then.
In order to be eligible for that grant funding, you can't do, everything that you do up to that point is not eligible for most of the grant funding. So we would put together the preliminary design, submit it that way, and if we get selected for that grant funding, then we start going through those
Gotcha.
motions essentially.
Gotcha. Okay. The only other comment that like kind of I have on it is, yeah, it seems like there's two primary areas of complaints. One is just the disruption to the nature preserve itself. So that I think that is a pretty valid concern there, especially knowing like some of the history of the space. So trying to minimize that. The other would be, as I was like, I went through and walked that today myself. I usually come from the north side. I don't usually come through from Center Drive, but coming from Center Drive, that area is kind of cramped through there. So like additional bike traffic and everything. And again, we're going to talk more about bikes and everything later tonight. That would probably be something we'd want to like create like a slow zone or something for if we did go through or still do go through Center Drive, because I can see where if someone's walking, I mean, I went to go park and everything, and I realized there is no parking spot over there. I had to go park like 2 blocks away and everything. So there's not really a whole lot of anything there. So
And
those are,
our intent was not to use it as a trailhead. You know, our intent is to use it just as the pathway, and the trailheads would be near parking lots like Chippewater's, like even the baseball stadium on campus.
yeah.
Those places that have current parking lots
Gotcha.
that can jump on that trail.
Yeah.
Like there's not going to be signage that says park here.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, if you're taking your bike, hopefully you aren't driving and everything. That's
Right.
the ideal. But the other is just like the sharing of the bike path with walkers. It just changes the space a bit. So because that is hard, because if you have a marathon biker coming up from Ithaca who's trying to break their record and everything, going through this section, they're going to be met with a lot of different pedestrian traffic and everything, which would probably mess up their time, which would probably be issue for both people, both the biker and the pedestrian. But I think my fellow commissioners have echoed a lot of my other concerns, but thank you, Phil.
Commissioner Eke?
No.
Go with.
Mine is
Bush.
super brief.
I will go
I could
after everybody else.
echo a lot of what my fellow commissioners have said, and I'm just playing devil's advocate in terms of what Boomer just said. But I have been involved in other bike trail communities where there is, significant maybe marking on the trail or on the pathway itself. Almost like you have on, a road.
Yeah, we currently do not have any wayfinding signs in our parks, so
Right.
that is something that's been on the CIP and been pushed
Right.
for years, so.
Yeah.
Commissioner Eke?
So I am very resistant to this right now because I know that particular space, kids play there all the time, winter during, spring, summer, there are kids walking around there, people walking around there. I hear you saying, yes, people take, that there are bikers on that trail. Just because bikers, some people violate those, the requirements or the stipulations or the signs that are there and then ride their bike through that place doesn't mean that we need to accompany them and do that. Okay, there are signs at various sections of that particular route saying bikes are not allowed, no motorized vehicles also. Just some people simply ignore those signs, and I have stopped them several times. I remember stopping a young man who said to me he was going to carry his bike from the bridge through the whole park He would not do it again. 2 weeks later, I saw him doing the same thing. There is tremendous erosion already around there, so what are you going to do? I'm concerned about, yes, you may not, I'm not going to say you, but I'm going to do ownership too, as city. We may not predict how many people are going to use it. There's no way that we can do that. But the problem is that once it's opened up, there is no containment of how many bikes go through there or what's going to happen. There's a church next door, by the way. Okay, so let's say, assuming one Sunday they have some kind of biking event, church is taking place, residents are walking around and you've got people flying through there. I don't know. I think, okay, so maybe we should look at the fact that we didn't get the grant as fortuitous. Can we use that opportunity to think about an alternative way or something, another option? Because I'm not so sure. And then have a conversation with CMU regarding the informing principle for establishing that particular space, that it's meant for, educational purposes in perpetuity. And we are stewards of this community and people who have articulated that we want, to protect the environment, we want more green space. We should find a way of protecting one that's actually there. So that's my position right now because I'm just simply not comfortable with it.
Sorry to cut you up. So one of the discussions that we did have with CMU was regarding accessibility. So that is one of the reasons why they liked the concept, because right now you could not get into that park if you were in a wheelchair or something like that. And so essentially that provides an accessible route into where they're going for their classes and things like that. We purposely followed the existing pathway in our design so that we didn't cut down trees and all those different things. So there was thought going into this whole design when it comes to that.
So you're saying that you're not going to cut down trees. There are a series of white pines sitting less than 2 feet from the existing path. Yeah.
I didn't say we weren't going to cut down any trees. I'm just saying we're keeping in mind what we're looking at. If you got pretty significant trees in there, you save them. That is the whole point. That for right now, we're going up the north route and we're going into Coin Oil's property just so we don't take down those trees along the east side of Crawford. So we can't protect everything. It's just not going to be possible with the way that but it will be in the mind while we're going through the concept and finalizing details and things like that.
I would like to suggest that you have some conversation with residents of that community so that you have a sense of, regardless of what we do, it seems to me CMU has already made up its mind. So it's important that we talk to people in the community. I realize some of them came here 2 weeks ago to talk, but it wouldn't hurt us as the city to go have a conversation. I have been doing that, but since you're designing this, maybe you should go in and have a conversation with them also. But I do think that I will go back to what my colleague has said, in terms of having a conversation with Dow. What if we start this and then Dow people come back and say to us, excuse me, yeah, but this was not what we envisioned when we agreed to give you this money. Then what? Conversation hasn't happened. Davis is gone. So now what? The city begins to look like, oh yeah, you're a destroyer of the environment. I don't like that.
Commissioner Bush.
Thank you very much, Director Biscorner, for bringing up the accessibility issues. When this gift was given in the mid-'70s, correct, right?
Yeah,
that was before the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I think, it was given with the utmost intentions of being a resource for the community, but as we all know, things change. You know, when our founders wrote the Constitution, they could not imagine where we would be today, just like when this was gifted to us in the 70s. You know, things have changed. I mean, I'm uncomfortable. I understand the concerns, but there's also a difference between preservation and conservation. And I think as in a city, conservation is really, it needs to be more of a focus. And that involves things like concentrating the impact. So, you know, providing an accessible, streamlined pathway could in the long run actually protect more of the resource. There are more people than there were in the mid-70s. We understand more about recreation needs in terms of different person's abilities, and that's a very good point. I mean, right now, this is an educational resource that's not accessible to some of our community. And I wish that there might be an alternative, but I mean, there are people in our community who would like to see this, you know, this, you know, birch, is it the birch that we're all in love with? Yeah. And I know that's beautiful, and it's, but I think that things change, and it, I mean, I will say at first I was very resistant to the idea that area be disrupted, but you know, that many of the trails themselves are deteriorating, and I think that yeah, the world is different than it was in the mid-70s, and we recognize there that we do not do a service to all members of our community by not making that accessible for all members of our community.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I will ask the City Commission, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, no. All right, we're moving on. The agenda has been accepted. So before we move into public comment, I just want to say a few words. My day job is a mental health therapist, and I really love listening to people. And unfortunately, because I love listening to people, a lot of times I give you guys a little more time than you actually are supposed to have. So to relieve some of that, I've got my timer on my phone. And as soon as you state your name and your address, I will hit the 5 minutes on that, okay? So at this time, we're going to open up for public input. You may step to the podium if you'd like to say anything on the agenda items tonight. Step to the podium, state your name and address, and you'll be given 5 minutes according to the timer. If you're joining us by Zoom, you may use the raise hand feature, or *9 if you're joining Zoom by phone. You'll be asked to state your name and address, and you'll be given 5 minutes. Is there anyone on Zoom at this time? Okay, are there any emails? Okay. All right, we see a couple of people getting in line here.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present this issue again. My name is William Odykirk, Odykirk. I live at 1348 Toma, that's Tomah Drive, Mount Pleasant, Michigan, 48858. My telephone number is...
We don't need your telephone number.
Okay.
I appreciate it, though.
I'll try to stay on time this time. Quickly, I believe there's two major parties who have avoided their responsibility to the public. One, the city. When the city, as Recreation Department, represented them, and he said they had a number of people at the university they have consulted on this issue. They consulted. Very few people heard about it. You would think that the city would have consulted the people who are adjacent to the property. We never heard anything about it at all, not one thing. Number two, the city, years ago, where the Crescent or Center Drive and Tolman Drive meet at that corner, that conjunction there. There was a stretch going about 300 yards for Crescent to continue on down, going to the east. The city was very happy to get rid of that because it was a piece of property wide enough for a 2-lane street. And what they did at that time, they consulted the people who would, later in a period of time, acquired property there to the south of Crescent, and they allowed those people to acquire that property, as I understood it, for $1 transfer. That was an area that the city could have used at that time for parking. In addition to the fault of the city, is that where do you park when you get there? Recently, there's a gentleman who lives in Kalamazoo. He said, "Great, Bill, I told him what was happening." He said, "That's good news, because so when we bring our group up through here, I won't have to stay at the university at 10. I come over and stay at your house, because we'll just connect right on through here, the trail to the Mackinac Bridge on Labor Day." So that's going to become a major transfer area for bicycles. Enough picking on the city. The university is really at fault here. For the past 6 or 7 years, the university has done nothing, virtually nothing, to support the community in the maintenance of that property. There was time after time that the university was requested for stuff, and they never did. Previously, the university not only had a faculty member work with them to maintain parts of the woods, and it was particularly along the fence. And they actually went so far as to hire a couple of kids off the wrestling team in the summer to come in and maintain that particular area. This past year or two, there was a couple of events happening along the way. It was mentioned to the president at that time, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. So the university really didn't have a lot to say about that. But when it came time to acquire that money, we had 10 days to acquire that property. It was 300 and some thousand at that time. Thanks to the manipulation of David Kerr, who was a legal attorney at that time, working with the Weiss family and myself, we worked out an arrangement to acquire that. I believe it was 150,000. The facts there, one of this gentleman has more on that. But in relationship to that, and walking back from that property with Herb down south, I said, "Herb, remember, we had 10 days to accomplish this whole thing, or it was going to convert over to the township," and they had a plan to put in 150 mobile home parks because they wanted water hookups to the township at the time. That was township property. Fortunately enough, Herb Dow stepped forward. Walking back from that woods, when we were walking through there, I said, "Herb, is there anything that the foundation would like to have on this property?" Because right at that time, there was a motorcycle on the hill right in behind there. And he said, and it happened to be a gentleman I know, and he owns an establishment here in town. And we asked him to stop tearing up the soil at that time. And he was rather reluctant, but he agreed. And he said, "Yes, no wheels. No wheels." I said, "Well, anything else you'd like to consider?" I said, "How about your name on it?" He said, "Well, it would be nice if Dow was acknowledged with it." He said, "Because it might open up the doors for other incidents like this, where they will approach us more often, and we could maybe be of assistance." Later in
Time's
life, I was asked to visit with the
Mr.
Dow people
Oderkirk?
again. My time's up.
Your time's up.
This is very important, this one. I was asked to visit with the Dow people in relationship to a major, major contribution for the School of Medicine and Health, that building. And I did. And they were happy to say at that time, they were really pleased with the way we handled their first contributions from the foundation. I would not want to be in a position I was at in those years, in coming years, to walk over to Dow and say, listen, you granted us money for the health building, you granted us money for the park, for Vice Woods, which used to be called Cathedral Woods. Would you want to be in a person asking Dow for a couple million to 50 million? When we backed off an agreement with them with no wheels? No wheels. He didn't say motors, he said no wheels. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I too have some congestion issues, so my apologies. My name's Tim Bechtel. I live on the corner of Toma and Center, so 1359 Toma Drive. My wife is here. We've raised our kids and witnessed many neighborhood kids grow up in that woods. One of the things I want to say is that as much as it's not intended to be a trailhead, it absolutely is, and we don't mind. We've had people parking all over the place. If you didn't know better, you'd think we were having a party every day of the year. So we've had people even park across our driveway and block us in. But that's okay, because every day we look and we see people that are coming over here, bringing their kids, bringing their significant other or significant other to be. We're watching photographers take families back. They're all dressed up to go get their pictures taken. We're watching different groups go by. It's a wonderful thing because it is a nice natural trail. And we see hikers go through, runners, more importantly runners, because I am a runner. I've ran over 40 marathons and ultra marathons in untold 10Ks and 5Ks. And if you walk that trail at any amount of time, we've crossed paths several times. And it's a great training place for people that are doing that. It's got some nice twists and turns. It's got some nice rooty areas to make sure you're not shuffling your feet. It's got some nice straightaways, but it's a great training area. And I can tell you that that is probably one of the most popular routes for runners in our town. Ellen and I were just talking outside of my house the other day, and about a group of 15 guys went running in the woods there. And I know it's hard to keep bikes out, but that's what it is. People aren't going to follow the rules. We already know that. So, but I've put hundreds of miles on all of our trails. I love our parks. I do it. I run those trails. I run the paved trails, but there's a big difference between the paved trails and that trail invites. You can walk that paved trail, and I guarantee you'll see some birds, but you won't see a whole lot of wildlife. You go into Vites Woods, you're gonna see deer, you're gonna see foxes, you're gonna see everything. Snakes, all the stuff. Making that change would be a big thing. And as far as engineering goes, I've got 25 years experience in sprinklers, drainage, and directional boring, so I really understand the hydraulics of water and what it does to dirt. That hill, that first hill that comes down, you're gonna have to do some significant work to that hill in order for it to not damage that bike path. You're gonna have to put drainage, you're gonna have to put riprap, you're gonna have to do a whole lot of stuff, because the path that everybody walks right now is actually the second path. Approximately 20 years ago, a young Eagle Scout, Tom Notstein's son, did a whole lot of work in there, if I'm correct. I don't know the actual specifics on that, but about approximately 50 foot to the north of the current trail that goes down the hill, there's another path was nicely worked on and stuff like that. And that, because of what Mother Nature has done to that, it had to get moved over. The path that you're talking about where it turns to the right to go to the bridge, well, that area there used to be, I'm guessing, about 80 to 100 foot into the river, because the river bends right there and it's eroded that whole path away. And and I know that area, we've lived there for 25 years. So give it another 20 years, that turn right there is gonna be underwater. So what I propose is that you keep going right down Watson, follow the curve, or follow Crawford, take the curve, go down Watson, where you're at the front of people's houses instead of behind people's houses, where you already expect to have lots of traffic. Meet up at the intersection at High and Watson. They can either turn left to go to Chipwaters Park, or they can go straight ahead to go to Nelson or Mill Pond or wherever they want to go. That wouldn't disrupt that hill at all, that wouldn't disrupt the woods at all, that would still preserve that area. And I just want to remind you that in the beginning, one of the things that we talked about were being good stewards. And that's about stewardship. And I recognize the ADA, we do all that stuff, but there's a huge difference between a paved path and a dirt path and what you're gonna see in, as far as nature goes. And you're gonna really have access to that. They still can get access from Chipwaters Park, but going that path that follows High Street from Chipwaters to the intersection there, you'd be significantly better off because of where that path is going. It'd be a lot easier path to follow, and it'll keep people out of that area. And like I said, I like my area. I don't mind people parking there, but that will be a much larger trailhead
Your
for
time
all
is
of
up.
us.
Thanking you.
Thanks, I appreciate you
Thanks,
guys
Tim.
listening to me.
Thank you.
I'm Alan Montoy, I live at 1212 Forest. Tim stole my thunder. He told us about his credentials as a runner. I'll tell you about mine as a cyclist. I've lived in town for 48 years. And virtually all of those years, I rode my bicycle to work every day. I've ridden every possible road in these 3 counties. I've ridden every trail that you can ride in these counties, and worn out several bicycles and I don't know how many tires. And I can tell you that riding on a bike path, such as the path from Shepherd to Mount Pleasant, is a delight for the most part. It runs right along the road. It doesn't disturb anything that's not already disturbed by the highway. We go at pretty high speeds through there, oftentimes 20 miles an hour. When I ride my bicycle around town to go to Island Park from where I live, I never ride it through Mill Pond Park because it's practically impossible to ride a bicycle without conflict from pedestrians with their dogs on their leashes, which means now I'm going to ride my bicycle at walking speed. So I simply ride up the sidewalk to Pine Street, ride down Pine Street, and now I'm in Island Park. Much safer, much more direct. I'm not conflicting with anybody. To think that a serious cyclist would ride that path through Bites Woods, over the bridge and all that, they won't do it. The only people that are going to do that are very slow bicyclists and walkers. And so if you're thinking that this is a great boon for the cyclist community, it's not. It will not work well for that. What was the cost of this trail development? Do you have a number? I've never heard what this, no one's ever said what the trail would cost.
I'm not sure, we had talked about getting a grant, the Spark grant, which we did not get.
Right. At this point, when we first did it, it was 1.8 billion.
$1.8 million to put a half a mile of asphalt through a wilderness. Doesn't make any sense to me. And Tim mentioned the alternative. If you're coming from south and you come through the traffic at Broomfield and West Campus Drive, it's easy there to stay on West Campus Drive all the way up to where you can get onto Watson, ride down to the light at Watson, and safely cross into Mill Pond or wherever you're going to go. It seems to me a very simple alternative, this whole thing, is to use Watson and take the curve around and wind up at Broomfield Street that way. I didn't hear where there was a path that was going to be constructed on Center Street or Crawford. So my assumption is that if you come out of the Vites Woods, you're now riding on the city street. No? Yes?
No,
Where, is there a path going to, is there,
the path will be connected all the way to West Hampton Drive.
where's the path going to be on Center Street?
It's gonna go right out Center Street and then take a right on, Crawford.
What does a physical path looks like on Center Street?
South side.
So you're going to build another path next to the road where there, looks like it would be like a sidewalk?
Yeah, and then it would be extending the sidewalk or widening the sidewalk down Crawford.
Okay. Well, I hope that the commission has the courage to rethink this whole project. I realize you have a lot of time, there's been money spent for engineering. That may be not the best expenditure of money, and I hope you have the courage to rethink this whole program and look at alternatives to destroying this property. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Just grabbing the water now, trying to sneak a second through.
Hi, my name is Bob Corman, 1215 Forest Lane. Just a few comments, I won't take too much time, but I would stress to all of you that the Dow Chemical Company is different than the Dow Foundation. They're different organizations, and you should appreciate that you should be referring to the Dow Foundation, not just plain Dow, okay? Two, the issue of accessibility, I'm very sensitive to that. I would say only that I understand that the grant funding that was used to build the bridge across the Chippewa River heavily relied on the issue of accessibility. And indeed, a course at CMU was created to talk to that subject. Do we need courses everywhere in Mount Pleasant? I'm just saying, I'm sensitive to that, but I'm thinking that the question is perhaps overused. I think each of you should probably take the time to walk the trails of Vites Woods before you go any farther. Unlike the maps that you saw, Vites Woods is not flat. And indeed, if you were to ask the bicyclists, why do they lift their bikes over the fence past a no bike sign? Why do they do that? The answer is, I want to go down the hill. That's what you're looking for in the future, which leads me to the next question. When accidents occur on this trail, who is the liability? Where is it at? Is it CMU or is it the city trail or CMU? I think that should be looked at. Finally, I would just underscore what the previous speakers have said. Please look at alternatives. $1.8 million for some asphalt? I'm not sure that's a rational decision, to be honest with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Joseph Barberry. My wife and I, Barb, we live at 1201 Forest Lane here in Mount Pleasant. I have to admit, along with Mr. Odekirk, his comments that until Mr. Montanoy kind of knocked on my door and said, do you know what's going on here about a bike trail going through Vites Woods? I was totally unaware of this project. I had the honor back in 1978 to build the first house on a 12-section cul-de-sac that bordered up to Vites Woods. But I also had the honor of being born and raised here in Mount Pleasant. And I'm pleased to say I'm probably older than any member on the city commission. And some of my friends say, if you want to know the history of Mount Pleasant, check in with Joe. I love this community very much, and I've always treasured Vites Woods. When I grew up as a young boy, we used to go over there and sled down the hill into the ravine that had water in it. And while I agree with the commissioners about the difference between preservation and conservation, and I appreciated your comments very much, From the other end of the Bites Woods through our Chippewa Park, people with wheelchairs can come in on that end and go along the river and actually even cross the bridge. I think it's one of my friends, Mary Ellen, got the bridge there,
Randall.
yes. And come into part of the Bites Woods. But preserving the natural habitat the way it is, so that when people walk in and see what it's looked like for 50 years, it's a treasure for the city of Mount Pleasant. And I can assure you, I've seen 6 feet or 8 feet of asphalt come in and bring in bicyclists and so forth. And I've seen what it can do in terms of people zooming in and doing and yelling and raising havoc and having a great time and bicycling. Fine. As Mr. Montnoy said, he's quite the bicyclist, and I enjoy biking too. But boy, can I tell you what I really enjoy? Just walking in that Bites Woods and having it be part of the city of Mount Pleasant. And I'm greatly, greatly concerned that putting in a paved lot going through there will undermine the solitude and peacefulness of that natural treasure we have. I think it would be a huge mistake to do it. I like Mr. Bechtel's comment about going down Watson and having, hey, if that's the price that it takes, first of all, we don't need this bike path. It's not something that's fundamentally necessary to help the disability people, the poor people, the fine people of this earth that need to ride a bike. We really don't need to spend that money as taxpayers. We really don't. But if there's a feeling that that's something that we have to have a better community, let's not destroy the treasure we have. So I want to let you know I've been living there for 45 years. I've enjoyed the fact that in my front yard, they pick up the trash, and in the backyard, I see the deer. And I'd love to keep it that way. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time? Is there anyone on Zoom? Okay. All right, that closes the public comment on agenda items. We will now move to receipt and petitions and communications. Manager DeSenz.
Receipt of petitions and communications this evening includes minutes of the Airport Joint Operations and Management Board from September, monthly report on police-related citizen complaints received, letters to the City Commission from Margaret Nothstein, letter to the City Commission from Anonymous, email to the City Commission from Bill Gerstenlauer.
All right, we'll move on to consent items. Are there any consent items that the commission would like removed from the consent calendar and moved on to the regular agenda? There's quite a few of them there. Are we good? Okay. Manager's sense.
Consent items this evening includes approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held October 28, 2024, approval of the minutes from the closed session held October 28, 2024, consider approval of truck purchase of a 2025 Ford F-150 pickup truck for $42,363 through the MIDO program and a budget amendment of $2,363. Consider approval of 2025 contract for fire department services for Union Charter Township. Consider setting a public hearing on December 9, 2024 on proposed rezoning of several parcels. They're all named in the memo as well as on the agenda. All of them located on the southwest corner of Crawford and Broomfield from a planned residential development to CD4, SDU, Special District University, and Civic Zone. Consider setting a public hearing on December 9, 2024 on proposed ordinance amendments to Table 154.405.A of the zoning ordinances as it relates to SDU University Special District rules, and consider approval of payrolls and warrants.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to accept the consent calendar as presented.
I move that we accept the consent calendar as presented.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, at this time, we have a public hearing on the proposed 2025 annual operating budget. I'm just going to mention right now that I have a really sore shoulder and the pain is really driving me nuts. So at this time, I will have Manager DeSense cue this up.
Absolutely. So the City Commission will need to hold a public hearing on the proposed 2025 budget. The proposed budget will expend $54 million. The budget maintains the current 16.25 millage rate from last year. The general fund will use roughly $190,000 of total fund balance, leaving the city with an estimated remaining unassigned fund balance of about $6 million at the end of 2025. The City Commission should take public comment during the hearing. If there is no further input or questions as a result of the public hearing, staff recommends the adoption of the 2025 proposed budget at our November 25th meeting.
All right, at this time, I will open up the podium for anyone that wishes to come and speak in this public hearing. You can step up to the podium. You'll be asked to state your name and address. You'll be given 5 minutes. If you're joining us by Zoom, you can use the raised hand feature or *9 if you're joining Zoom by phone. You'll be asked to state your name and address, and you'll be given 5 minutes. Is there anyone that wishes to come forward and speak on the annual operating budget for 2025. Are there anyone on Zoom? Are there any emails? All right, I don't see anybody rushing up to talk about the budget. Okay, at this time, I will close the public hearing. Seeing that there are no questions brought forward and the commission does not have to take action at this time, the next time this will be brought before us is the November 25th meeting. All right, so we will move on to number 15, new business. Manager DeSense.
So this is a request for fire suppression and facade improvement funding allocation for Tijor Mac LLC, which is at 120 South University, and request for a work session. Tijor Mac occupies and owns 120 South University and is seeking $42,500 from the city to support fire suppression and facade improvements at that location. The programs that formerly provided funding for these activities had expensed all of the allocated funds in 2024. The City Commission provided support to 200 East Broadway as part of the rent grant application from that developer. The City Commission is asked to consider the request from Tijor Mac, as well as consider a future work session on if the program will be funded into the future. One thing to note for the City Commission, the only funding available for this project is the use of our unassigned general fund dollars. There's no more specialty money put aside for this one in particular. We also do have our Downtown Development Director, Michelle Sponseller, with us as well, too, to answer any particular questions the City Commission may have on this.
Okay, Director Sponseller, would you like to step to the mic so we don't have you just jumping up and down all night? Okay. Are there any questions? Vice Mayor?
Do we anticipate that we might get some kind of funding for this next year? So if we postpone this, it could be from a certain pot of money that is meant to be for facade improvements rather than this special request?
I want to be clear. So are you asking if the state may have incentives, or are you asking if we will? We being the city, that is.
Either.
Okay, so without having a crystal ball, no way to know that, unfortunately. So some of this has to do with timing. The property owner in question would like to start work, not only start, finish work in a very expedited time frame. And so if that happens, the state won't be able to bring incentives in because that they'll pass one another, if you will. So it's a matter of timing at this point.
Unless we delay.
If you delay in that particular case, then he's going to continue, and then we can't activate payment for something that's already been done. It's just not something that we've done.
Okay.
Any other questions? Commissioner Wingard.
Yeah, the programs that where we have we offer grant funding for the facade and fire suppression systems. Is that normally just like what is the normal funding procedure have we done in the past for it? Could you refresh me like how we put funds from like city money into these grant funds and everything? Yeah.
So going back to the end of 2018, when the TIFA board took their capture rate to 0. So there was multiple things going on at this time. So capture rate goes down to 0. Events go to recreation for the most part. And at that time, TIFA had a little bit of funding still remaining for incentives. And at the time, the commission provided more of those funds from the Economic Initiatives Fund. So that's the source of those funds. And after a while, we've just been drawing down those funds, if you will. We've not added more to it.
So since 2018, like we created the pot in 2018 and we haven't added to it since and everything. It's just been slowly draining off.
Correct.
Okay. And they're looking for an expedited to like again have it before the winter, it sounds like, I'm assuming.
Yes, they are in the midst of working on the building as we speak, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, no, I know the spot and everything. I had to just double check, but it's Pisanello's, that building, Dog Central.
Dog Central and Vintro Phase 120.
Not Pisanello's, yeah.
Nope, that's okay. 120 South University, so the corner of University and Michigan Street. And for those of you who have been around a while, I will say the old City Hall.
Yeah.
Dang, I knew it was
Yes.
public safety. I didn't know it was City Hall. Okay, gotcha.
Correct.
And the other thing, your memo, I believe there was a line in there that made it sound like there was interest from other
Yes.
property owners. What
Yes.
kind of interest are you seeing in this?
Well, not a whole lot, because I sent word out to everyone that the funds had been utilized and that there was not an outlook for more funding. So that conversation, other than this particular property owner and one other, I've not went out and had any conversations because I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not going to be making any promises if there's no
There's no money
funding.
currently.
Right.
Yeah.
Bad idea.
Okay, Commissioner Bush.
So just for some clarity, I think I missed the meeting that was on the Tuesday where we might have discussed some of this before, but no, was that a different one?
No, you missed that one. Yeah, we had,
Yeah,
we talked about
okay.
that.
So what was the process by which, so business owners were given an opportunity to apply for this?
Previously?
Yeah.
Okay, so property owner, I would say 3-4 times a year, I would talk to property owners and business owners, but primarily property owners in this particular case, having to do the facade improvement program along with the facade or fire suppression program. And as you might imagine, there'd be sometimes projects would be discussed, but they never would actually take place. So sometimes we had to wait for the right stars to align. And since I would say property standards, International Property Maintenance Code went into effect, that really kicked things off. It absolutely did. We went from some interest to let's go ahead and apply and utilize these funds. So you've seen a lot of work downtown with especially painting, having to do in some awnings over the last 18 months that really everyone wanted to suddenly apply and utilize those funds, which is a good thing.
I just wanted to make sure it was something that was, and now I remember the whole program, correct? Okay.
Commissioner Eke?
I just want to, just some clarity. So is this the only application that we received, or there was another one?
This is the only one I currently have. The other has just been conversation. But to be clear, we don't have an application process at this point in time because there is no funding. So if there was funding,
we would have
set a work session, we determine that, then we would open up that. Because at this point in time, again, not making promises for funding I don't have.
Okay.
Are you gonna finish?
And these, the funds to support this infrastructural updates have usually been associated with grants? Because right now, what you're saying to us is that the only available fund would be from the unassigned general fund. Am I clear?
Correct. The initial source of those funds were the Economic Initiatives Fund here at the city.
Okay,
Right?
okay.
So the application that we discussed a couple weeks ago was tied to a grant.
I see.
But if I was to look back on all of the other applicants, that would be the only one. Otherwise, it was the property owner utilizing their own funds and not having a match via the state, for example.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Chapman.
I was reading this and I couldn't help but think it would seem more logical to me to have a work session to talk about funding before we just award funds. I mean, I think that would probably be the most financial responsible thing to do to say, how can we allocate funds to have a budget item to say we want to do this before we just give, money away for it. So that's just my opinion.
Commissioner Atkins.
I do want to say that I'm not opposed to this idea, but I do think it's just wise to do it that way.
I think the work session that they're requesting is for us to create this again.
Yeah.
Not these are like two separate things.
Well,
Correct.
I do agree with, Commissioner Chapman's suggestion, though, that, given that we don't really have an existing pocket of funds that is associated with this, except for the general funds, that perhaps we should have a work session to determine how much, if we are going to use money from the general fund designated for projects like this, because we really don't have any money right now sitting there. I agree with what he's saying.
Commissioner Wingard.
Yeah, I'm on the same page of supporting the work, especially because it's a program that we've had previously and it falls within that scope. It's just we've run past the deadline on what funding is available for it. When they say expedited fashion and everything, how expedited would they need the funding?
I don't have an exact
That's okay,
timeline, but
yeah.
they are currently working on certainly
doing
the
it right
facade
now,
at this
yeah.
point in time. The fire suppression piece is going to take, I say longer. How much longer? I don't want to hazard a guess because that's going to involve engineering, the building official, things like that. Fire department, obviously. So I don't know the exact timeline.
Yeah, and this kind of is a little bit of a conversation Commissioner Bush and I had about this of on the previous project, that one, it was a really important project for the downtown. They're looking for RAP funding and everything, which is going to bring in a lot more money than what we were putting into it initially. But now we have the second request on a program that's out of funding. So I feel like we're kind of running into we opened up the genie jar on that.
Well, and to be clear, I was having conversations with this property owner as the funds were, dwindling down. So this wasn't just, I heard about the other applicant. This was a conversation before, and I had to give them the news of there's no more funding at that point in time. They started the work, and so then they saw the article in the newspaper and reached out.
That does make me feel a bit more better about our actions, especially. But yeah, definitely wanting to be able to discuss it a bit further about being able to carry on the project rather than just making them on an exception or making them on a request basis.
Commissioner Bush.
Are there any considerations in play whereby, let's say we offer this incentive to the property owner, but then they go maybe in a year from now, year and a half from now, turn around and sell it for a profit based on the improvements that the city helped pay for? Is that, I understand that the money is more about the benefit to the city, but I just also have this concern that, because I've seen this happen before with other city actions, where when a benefit is given to a business, they could just turn around and use it to their advantage with a sale later. And I just didn't know if that was.
It's not something that we have ever put into the details of the program, but if I'm having to go through my head of others, because I'm trying to think if we've had out of the, let's call it 15, there may have been 3 that have been sold within maybe 2 years, not a year. So
Right.
When it sells, it gets reassessed, so.
There is that as well.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, and it looks like this company is committing $350,000
Right.
to their development, and the 42.5 is, from the city is not going to, it's not matching their $350,000 that they're already committed to it. It's just a piece of it.
And another point I just want to bring up real quick is this is a reimbursement. So let's go through, let's say the facade work is done, then they would send in the receipts of payment, that's how we pay. So let's get to the fire suppression. Let's say we're 6 months down the road and that hasn't been done, they've changed their mind, whatever, then you are not out those funds, because again, it's a reimbursement. Until the work is done, the funds are not sent.
Okay, that, I didn't ask that question, but that's a good question. And thank you for the answer.
Are there any other questions, comments, concerns?
I'm feeling comfortable supporting this, but yeah, I definitely would want to have a work session in the future to discuss the program going in the future. I don't want, again, as Michelle had mentioned, like this was a discussion that was already in the works prior to the last, like prior to the funds expiring. That makes it feel more comfortable for me that that conversation was already taking place. And again, as Mayor Perschbacher has pointed out, there is considerable investment already going into this. So I feel comfortable supporting this, but yeah, just want to have a further discussion as a commission prior to doing any other action with these with this program.
Yeah, well, it would be like creating the program.
Yeah, it'd be funding the program.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Commissioner
tweaking the guidelines if necessary.
Yes.
Commissioner Ake.
I have a counter suggestion, since we are going to have a work session, so I don't know when we're going to have the work session, but I do think, I think that it is reasonable to say, let's talk about, have a conversation on the funding for this, because this has also larger implications, we don't, there's no money in the, I'm looking at this as somebody who does grants too. So the grant has run out of money and a request has come in. Well, now we're scrambling, or we're going to go find money that is unassigned or possibly that may be used for something else to support, a grant request where the grant has run out already. I would think that a reasonable thing, or at least a fiscally responsible thing to do, would be to pause, have a conversation about this, and then say, okay, we're going to support it. This is what we're doing. I don't know what we're going to do with the unassigned funds. I mean, I do know that we have potential projects, but I think we should have this conversation first. Before, I'm not saying that I'm not supportive. I'm supportive of the grant or the proposal or the idea, but I do think that it is important for us to have that conversation before going ahead and saying, okay, just give the money. That's where I stand.
Commissioner Bush.
I know we're kind of absent a CFO right now, but what has been like city feelings on this in terms of, my understanding is that, we are very fiscally sound right now, but obviously we want to maintain that. I'm horrible with numbers. And so, $42,000, that's not probably going to make or break us in our budget. Correct?
I don't know. We don't know.
That is correct. It would take a budget amendment for this year. It will still bring final amended budget before the city commission at our December 9th meeting. So it's still a possibility of amending the budget, $42,000 out of it. As I had read earlier, proposed end for the 2025 fiscal year, we would have about $6 million in total reserves set aside. So if you wanted to identify it out of that pool of money, that's probably the best way that I could give you.
Thank you.
Okay, one thing I want you to explain is TIFA and how we got funds in TIFA to begin with.
Oh goodness, you want me to explain TIFA?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because these are not grant funds in
No.
TIFA.
Well, to be clear,
captured.
there is no, let's
there's
talk
no
about
funds now.
downtown. Right, correct. I was going to say, because there's been a lot of discussion about Tifa having to do with the election last week, and I just wanted to be really clear which Tifa we're talking about. So is the question these particular programs or just how Tifa works in general?
Well, how did we have funds to do these programs?
So originally, they were tax capture within the district of downtown. Don't have a map, so I can't show it to you, but it is online. And a certain portion of those were set aside for programs, fire suppression, the facade improvement, along with infrastructure projects, primarily parking lots. And then at the end of 2018, when we were making multiple changes, again, taking the tax capture to zero, the decision by the commission at that time was to provide funds from the Economic Initiatives Fund to Tifa to use for these programs and use it as what we would call a drawdown. So keep drawing down until that number is zero or it is refunded. Given more funds, I should say, not refunded.
So technically, these were tax dollars that
Correct.
we pulled from the general. We said, okay, you paid $100, we're going to take 25 and put it in this little space.
Yes.
This little, referring back to the Citizens Academy, this bucket. Right?
Exactly, yes.
Did this bucket, we put some
Yes.
money in there. It's
Correct.
just for this stuff.
Correct.
So it's not like we have written a grant and we've run out of funds from the grant. This is
No.
stuff that was in a bucket that we had decided we were going to not capture anymore. We're just going to take it down.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. The source is not grant funds.
Yes.
To be clear, correct.
I want to correct my comments. I used grant as an analogy. I did not say Tifa was a grant.
Yes, but.
I'm just
Okay.
giving it
Yeah.
as an analogy,
Okay.
saying, as somebody who writes grants, because for me, Tifa is a pocket of money. We've got a pocket of money in under that. And now we don't have that pocket of money anymore. And a request has come in that ordinarily would be funded through this pocket of money. Am I clear?
My hesitation is that prior to 2019, yes, Tifa would have been that bucket of money. And at that time, funds were given to the Tifa board through the Economic Initiatives Fund bucket, if you will, and transferred over into a different bucket.
Okay, but that money no longer exists.
Correct.
That's what I'm asking. That's what
That's
I'm
correct.
getting at. Now, a request has come in for a pocket of money that no longer exists.
Correct.
And now we're looking at some money that we have already set aside that has not been designated to see if we can use some of it to fund this.
Yes.
Okay, all I'm saying is I want to have a conversation about this. I am not saying I'm not supporting it or that I'm supporting it. I just simply want to have a conversation to discuss it, and then we'll go forward. That's all I am asking for.
Commissioner Bush?
So in 2019, basically, we set apart this goal of a budget, in a sense, to accomplish a goal, right? To accomplish a goal of this. So 2019 construction money is a lot different than 2024 construction money. So my interpretation of this is simply, this seems to fit into our original goal of what we want to do for our community in terms of the facade and fire suppression. It's just that things cost more now than they did in 2019, so we just need to fund it just a itty bit more, and then proportionally, that seems to be about the goal where we were gonna end up with the original plan. That's my convoluted way of looking at it.
Then let's talk.
Yes, well, that's part of this, is a requesting a work session, but the first part is the requesting of the $42,500.
What I was going to
Yes.
suggest is that we make this, part of that work session. They are related anyway.
Okay.
That's all I'm asking.
Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
All right, so we have this on the table. I will entertain a motion at this time.
What's the motion?
It's not my motion.
Are we making a motion to grant? the
I move
funding?
that we hold off on the request until we have a work session to set aside allocated funds for these kind of grants.
I will second it.
Okay, we have a motion to table, to set aside until a work session. All those in favor say yes.
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 All those opposed, no. No.
No.
It's 4-2. Motion carries. All right, we're going to move on to announcements on city-related business and new business, city-related issues and new business. This is where the city commission brings forward information that they have about going-ons in the community or would like to bring in new information that's out there for the staff to know about. Do we have any, Vice Mayor?
Well, this is in the past, but yesterday the community band held a really nice Veterans Day concert, and this year they did it at Mount Pleasant High School.
Nice.
It's very nice.
Commissioner Wingard?
Yeah, but the very affirmative, like, I would like to speak, yes. Let's see, we had an election since the last time we met. Congratulations to my fellow commissioners who are seeking re-election. And then I just wanted to share some of these stats that were shared with us on election day. If that's all right. I hope I'm not putting Heather Bach on the spot or anything. Okay. We had a 71% voter turnout, which was great to see. It's really important that you get out there and exercise your right to vote. We had 23% was early voting, 39% was absentee voting, and 38% was on election day. And then the thing that I really thought was cool to see, we had it on the day of election day, we had 237 people get in to register to vote. Either they hadn't remembered to register beforehand, or they were changing their registration, maybe they're a student, but we had over 200 people who took advantage of that option to be able to vote where they live. So those are just some of the highlights I wanted to share. And again, thank you to the community. 71% turnout is really incredible. So, yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other? Commissioner Chapman?
I just want to say, good job to the city with the downtown Halloween. Good job, Phil. And the public safety had a trunk or treat that I understand went really well too. And yeah, a lot of people involved to make those things happen. And so yeah, that was very cool. I think one thing I think we need to bring to our next meeting is, I was very concerned with the anonymous letter that came in. And so I think that's something that I don't think it's wise just to wash under the table and pretend we didn't get it. So I think it's something we have to address and talk about.
Okay.
Would that be?
I think that was
Do we need a
something
motion or
planned for.
something?
No, I think that's already in the plans.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other comments? No? Director?
I just want to thank all the veterans for their service and active duty members. They are what provide us freedom, so they're very well appreciated.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Any other announcements at this time? Okay. Okay, we will move on to public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. I want to remind everyone that I will have a timer set so that I do not go over with anyone. Hopefully I can make this a little louder than it was. I don't really like my timers going off and scaring the bejeebies out of me.
Get a foghorn.
So, I should, yeah. So I try to keep them quiet. If you'd like to speak on something on the agenda or non-agenda items, you may step to the podium and you'll be given 5 minutes after you state your name and address. If you are joining us by Zoom, you may use the raised hand feature or *9 if you're joining Zoom by phone. You'll be asked to state your name and address and you'll be given 5 minutes. Are there anyone on Zoom? No? Okay. Are you stepping to the podium? Okay.
Good evening.
Cynthia Kilmer, 219 North Lansing Street. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
So the police officers union is called POAM, Police Officers Association of Michigan. And I said I was going to talk a little bit about that today, so I am. When I grew up, my mother always told us, my brothers and I, that the police were our friends, and I took that to heart. I really did. I loved the police and wanted to be their friends and have them be my friends, and it was just kind of part of my identity, you know, and my personal philosophy of the world. And this, I kept that for most of my life. But anyway, when I got my first serious job, where I was actually making some money, I started getting marketing calls from POAM, the police union. And what they would do is they would call you and they would say, you know, we're looking for donations from the public to support your local police. And so I was right into that, you know. I'd be giving them like $30, $35 every time they called or whatever, you know. And then they'd say, if you give us this money, we're going to send you a sticker. And you can take this sticker and you can put it like either on your car or on the window by your house. And so if the police have some reason to come to your house, they'll see the little sticker. And they insinuated, or maybe said right out loud, that if you have this little sticker and the police saw it, that, you know, things would go better for you. So, shoot, what the heck, you know, for $30, $35, yeah, sure. So I was always buying these little stickers and sticking them, you know, on the window by my door. I hadn't really thought it out at the time. Now I think it's a crazy idea, but back then, you know, I was different than I am now. So one day, this was in the late 90s. Actually, I was on the city commission at that point. I got a phone call from POAM, the usual marketing call, and would I want to donate? And for whatever reason, I think I was sick. I had pneumonia. I was in bed. I was just like, I don't really want to take a phone call. We didn't have cell phones back then, you know. You had to like actually get up and walk down the hallway and get to the phone or whatever, you know. So I did it. And it was POAM, and I always gave the POAM. But that year, I just said, you know, I've got pneumonia. I just got to go back to bed. I just can't even take this call. I'm so sorry. And, you know, I said, oh, yeah, goodbye or whatever. And I said goodbye, but this, what do they call it? A hot mic, when they think that you're hung up, but you're not. And as I'm about to hang up the phone, I hear this guy call me this name. And the name referred to me as a female canine who was in the act of copulation. And I was so stunned. It's just, you know, sometimes you hold these really firmly held beliefs and they're just part of who you are. And then when something happens, it's just like, you just go, you know, what? This doesn't compute. So I just want to say, recently I looked up more about POAM, and the money people send to POAM does not go to their local police, and it is not going to support your local police. It goes to conventions where policemen go to, and it will pay for all kinds of fun things that they're doing while they're, and lobbying efforts, but it doesn't really help your local community. So I just want to let the public know that. It does not go to what you think it's going to. And those little stickers that you can put on your car or your window, that doesn't work either. The police don't and shouldn't think to themselves, oh, look at, they have a sticker, they gave money, we should let them go. I mean, what kind of a world would that live in? I mean, would it be for us to live in? You know, if you could buy a sticker so you never got a ticket. Wouldn't that be crazy? And so the people who can't afford the $30 donation, what? They're the ones that get arrested and pulled over and ticketed, and those of us who have $30, you know, we don't have that happen to us. I mean, it's just nonsense. It's crazy. The money doesn't go local. If you really want to support your local police, which I'm not against, you know, ask the police, the local guys, what kind of programs are they supporting, and join in on that. Thank you very much. Next time, I'm going to start talking about Officer Angela Brown.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time?
Hello, my name is Margin Notstein, and I live at 1361 South Crawford Street. That is just page 46 from your packet from today. It's just got 4 important bullets on it that I'm gonna, if I have enough time, talk about. But it should be part of your packet. It says that I'm gonna talk about that southwest corner again. Now that I see that your city planner has removed the Christian Academy School advertisement on her presentations, which had been showing the southwest corner as their new home, I can tell you she knows she overstepped by using that exact same ad as the school website had on it. It shows they're working together and planning. It shows preferential treatment by the city staff. Now, anyone, a Muslim school or a Jewish school or whatever civic category you can imagine will ask for the same preferential treatment. They'll want 30 acres rezoned from housing sites to CZ for themselves also. The city gave nonstop help when they did this. Your decision to rezone should not be even considering the fact that it's a Christian school. It is still my contention that their school can be built in any field outside the city limits and still have full power of education that they want. And then it will allow us in the city the needed housing sites on that 30 acres. It has been left empty, an empty field, until when we needed it for housing. It is so important. There have been bites in the last 20 years, so some people are interested in it. The planner told of other phone calls about that area. It just wasn't the right time or the right people. And besides that, the pedestrians can walk or ride a bike in a subdivision so much better than a schoolyard. I just wanted to talk a little bit about those 4 bullet points. It says one of them refers to more housing in the first bullet. More housing could help attract new residents. Second one, a newly identified trend needs to be supported by housing. What else? The third one says we have a missing middle housing option in Mount Pleasant. And the 4th bullet was just about the numbers that she had cited that were crazy, wild, incorrect. Now she comes down to 190 people in the city who are without a K through 12 supervised education, I guess. Using the 30-plus acres at the southwest corner for housing, as was put forward in the 2000 PRD contract, is consistent with the original and the future. Finally, the city planners also always explain that the private school deviates from the future land use map. So zone it for housing and don't deviate. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak at this time? All right. I will close the public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. At this time, we're going to, shall we take a recess?
Yes, please.
We will take a 5-minute recess and come back at 8:48 for a work session on motorized bikes and scooters on the trails.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, now we're going to move into our work session. It's a discussion of usage of motorized bikes and scooters on city-owned trails. Manager DeSenza.
So the issue of motorized bikes was brought to this group by some of the public. I know some of the city commissioners had gotten some outreach from an individual about concerns about motorized bike on the city trails. Today, the staff just wanted to discuss with the issue with the city commission, try to get some feedback. I know that Director Paul Loria had provided a memo, just kind of teeing the topic up, some things to consider as we get into this, but just want to have the conversation and hoping to get some direction from the city commission as to where we want to go on the issue.
Okay. All right. Anybody want to start? Everybody's chewing caramels over here, so I'm not sure we're
I'm
going to
just now
get.
learning that these bikes go so fast. I'm kind of wondering what, like, complaints, if people are saying that they're on there or they're going too fast on there.
Yeah, walkers or runners, typically they'll get what I termed as buzzed by a bike flying through the,
Like Nelson Park or something.
I want to
up
be
the trail.
clear on the path and trail and, because there's a lot of confusion there too. The path through Mill Pond Park, I'm going to call it a path. But yes, those are the types of complaints.
So that they're there or they're going too fast?
That they're going too fast.
Oh, okay.
They're going too fast, and there is the complaint that I received. And one of the other things I've heard is that there seems to be very little bike etiquette. You know, when you're passing somebody, you're supposed to say on your left as you're going past them, and that does not happen that often. I have been buzzed by bikes as I'm walking along, and all of a sudden, phew, they go flying past. Go ahead.
I was going to jump to what's probably going to be the end of the discussion. Enforceability, reasonable enforceability, and I mean, yeah, we all agree they're growing too fast, but what are we going to do about it?
Well, there are a couple of options. I don't want to get any fruit thrown at me. But number one is do we want manual human power only bikes? Now, they can go, I mean, I've seen some of these people ride. They're very fast. Then we have to consider if we want e-bikes, which can be electric or human power or a combination of both. And then what are we going to do with scooters?
Yes.
So there's a number of things that that we're going to have to get some direction on. The other part is that there are signs that say no motorized vehicles prohibited. Now, those signs were put up way pre-Phil and without any backing of an ordinance. So it would be nice if people obeyed them, but when they don't, there's nothing that we can do, essentially. So we're going to have to have some sort of ordinance to address motorized vehicles as well. So
I mean, I hate more signs, but you know what? Sometimes signs seem like the only solution we have. And when I mentioned the painting on the trails, I've also seen it where it's 10 miles an hour or something like that. I mean, that might help, optimistically, maybe 50% of people to be like, oh yeah, other people are here, But, yeah, I don't have a lot of, faith in, people's ability to be considerate of other people sometimes. So, and I know that it's not reasonable to assume that we can, enforce traffic everywhere, but just some gentle reminders.
Didn't we just buy 2 motorcycles for better trail access for enforcement? Like, isn't that a whole conversation that we had?
Yeah, but
I
that's-
just reminding my fellow commissioners,
Well, but I do-
the point of an ordinance, though, the point of an ordinance is like, yeah, we may not be able to catch 99% of the people
Right.
doing it, but the minute that there's a bad bike accident,
Yeah.
then there is punishable, like there is an ordinance that was being broken there that we
That's
can
true.
point to, that this person was in violation of something. So I didn't mean to poke fun at the 2 bikes and
It's
everything.
okay,
It was like, we can try
Yeah.
something. We can
It's
do
okay.
something. Yeah.
But that's a double-edged sword, and let me tell you why. Because we can stop bicyclists now on the roadway just like we can a vehicle. And if you want to create a public relations nightmare, I can send my officers out to do that. And when a bicyclist rides through a stop sign and he gets a 3-point ticket and a $200 and some fine like a driver of a vehicle,
I mean, it's a nightmare, yeah.
yeah. So if you want to put a speed limit on the trails, then by all means, it isn't that we can't enforce it. It's how much time do you want us spending us to enforce it? And what are you going to do when the complaints start rolling in that someone was riding their bike 10 miles per hour at 11 miles per hour in the 8 mile per hour zone of the trail? That's where your support comes in. So it's not that we can't do it.
Yeah, and to be clear, also, my point, the point I'm trying to illustrate is that, like, we can take it, like, I mean, not pulling people over, but we put ordinances in place for a purpose. So again, that there is action that we can take. So we can put in place signage like we're talking about. Or, for example, if we move into wanting to ban electric bikes or scooters through an area, we could direct BIRD to section off sections of the city that say no electric scooters or skateboards through here. But we can't do that without an ordinance. And while it might, enforcement might look different than sending out the boys in blue and everything, we can still take action to do things. Like, there's still policy that we can put in place that will shift the culture. And that's all. That's my point there.
Chapman?
How I do everything is just about the same way. I think the most important thing to me is to use the least restrictive measures possible to fix the problem. And so I mean, just the same as I pay taxes to ride my bike there slow. This is for the thing. I don't actually ride a bike. I have one in storage, but I mean, these people that are riding birds or people that are riding their bikes are still paying taxes, and we're using their money to put the path in and take care of it. So I think to try something and not just say, let's just ban everything. Try something and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, then be more restrictive. And if it doesn't work, then be more restrictive. I think the least restrictive we can be, the better in my mind. And again, this is me. I'm unaffected by it, right? I just know that people are using it, and so to just ban things that, especially when some people I know have their only bike is an electric bike, right? So it's not like they have electric bikes, so I'm going to take my pedal bike one day because I know that's banned, but I mean, and I do agree with you. I have very little faith that people are just going to be, gracious to other people around them because they want to be, or because they read a sign, right? So, but yeah, that's just my thoughts.
Commissioner Eke?
Okay, as somebody who walks, those parks, yeah, I have been, I don't know what you call it, buzzed, almost knocked over by, yeah, I'm not kidding. I have bikes, I ride bikes, I ride my bike actually from Watson through, what is it, Nelson,
Mill Pond.
Mill Pond, and over here, and even up to,
Island.
Picard Island, Picard. I ride my bike all over town, but my bikes have those bells, right? No, I'm not, yeah, you start laughing. Yeah, they have those bells, and I put them there deliberately because sometimes I will shout and say, come in around you on the right, or I will use my bells. But not everybody does that, and I have been swiped several times walking by bikes. So it's very disconcerting or traumatizing when, you suddenly you feel like, oh, somebody could have knocked you over, and they're going like, sorry, and they're just fleeing, right? So, yeah, I do agree that maybe an ordinance is not the ideal thing to do right now. But I have been to parks where there are signs actually that say, hey, respect, or share the path or something like that. Just because if you're riding and doing the crazy stuff or riding mindlessly and you see that, it draws your attention to the fact that you're sharing it with some other people. I think, that might help. We've got to figure out a way that, to make that place usable and shared for everybody so that people don't feel that, oh my God, the city of Mount Pleasant has gone crazy over this bike thing. It's shared road, just as there are those signs too in the street itself for the bike lanes that say share it. There's one on Broadway where it says that the lane is ending, bike lane is ending, share it. So what would it cost us to put up some of those and make them visible, with a yellow sign that says, there are other people using the path with you. And then if that doesn't work, then I would seriously consider an ordinance. At this moment, I don't know that, an ordinance is necessary, but I'll move towards that if nothing else works. I don't know. It's difficult, yes. And I don't know that we want to restrict. I've seen people using scooter. I've seen people on e-bikes. In fact, there's somebody who has this huge bike with huge tires that I see, and they're students, by the way. It's not, we have to bear in mind that we have students in this community who live all over the place. And for some, that's the way, an easy way to get through, cut across town to get to CMU. So, and I'm thinking about that also. If we say don't use your e-bike when that's what they're using to get to campus, then what?
Mm-hmm.
Director, do you want to respond?
So what I'm hearing is we're not interested in a ban, the elimination of tires on the path.
All bikes have tires. Which tires do you want to eliminate?
I'm just making sure that I heard you correctly.
I think a lot of the complaints that we have recently generated have been generated by electric or self-propelled.
All bikes are self-propelled.
What was the other one?
So, okay, by
Motorized.
Motorized.
Yeah, motorized, thank you, yeah. I feel like a lot of the complaints that we've been getting recently have been about motorized. So I feel like a human-powered, you're cranking the chain and everything with your 2 feet and everything, a pedal bike. I feel like that we don't have to worry about so much. I feel like people are focused on the new field of electric bikes, electric scooters, skateboards.
I don't know, I mean, just hearing that those, people are riding their bikes 20, 30 miles an hour.
Speed.
Just with their legs, I mean, I think that blows my mind.
I just looked up online, a very simple little sign, and it's even this nice green that doesn't seem to be it would be annoying in the wilderness. And it just says, go slowly, respect others.
That's it. That's what I mean.
Okay.
I think
it's worth a shot
And
doing
that's
something.
not a speed limit, so it doesn't have to be you know what I'm saying? And I think we'd still get the same number of calls, but hopefully we'd get less Because maybe some people will be like, oh yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, there's definitely a delicate balance to be struck here.
Put speed bumps in there.
Well, the
Wait, that's asking for trouble.
Speed bumps. I mean, that'll slow people down.
No, it doesn't, no.
Or we'll speed them up.
I mean, I think, so for me, I think about like campgrounds. I camp a lot, and the speed limit in some of these campgrounds are 3-4 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, people start to learn, once I enter a campground, I just slow down. I don't know how we get that same message to, slow down once you hit the bike path or the paths or the.
Put a speed limit on the sign. I've seen that too.
Well,
It says no more than this speed limit.
We can, but if we do that, I would like an ordinance to back it up.
Okay,
And then
yes.
we can do, well, I don't want to say, I would talk to Mr. Homier about like a municipal civil infraction. Because it's not a public roadway, it would be a path.
Yep.
So if you guys would be interested in that, we can definitely draft and then do a sign, but I need to know what your, like, what number you want on it. Or what are you thinking?
You mean the speed limit?
What do other cities, like what do other trails have?
That's a very good question, and I apologize. I'm not prepared to answer that, unfortunately.
Maybe we should look
But
into
I
that.
have it written on here, what do other cities do? So,
No, seriously, let's look into that.
Well, and who has, I mean, do these bikes have
Right,
speedometers?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, those e-bikes
Listen,
do.
the e-bikes may,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the scooters do.
The scooters do for sure, yeah.
Vice Mayor.
Since our question to discuss was about using motorized bikes and scooters on city-owned trails, I think we're pretty much in agreement that we need to allow them. And then maybe do some signage for let's be respectful of others.
I would try that first and just try to do some kind of informative signage. And if it's not fixing the problem, then that'd be more restrictive.
I would like, so I am not opposed to an ordinance because I do feel like too often we lag behind current trends. And e-bikes and scooters have been around for a while, and we should probably have had this discussion a few years ago. But that being said, I do agree that we could try with a information campaign first, knowing that
we may move towards an ordinance.
we may move towards an
eventually.
ordinance because I don't think that you're going to be passing out tickets willy-nilly, but would an ordinance help you? Like, okay, so if we set the speed limit as 10 miles an hour and somebody's going 15 and they're like, oh, sorry, I'll slow down or whatever, maybe they wouldn't get a ticket, but if they're going 30, then you have some leverage. So that's where I'm wondering if an ordinance would help you. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think an ordinance will also, keep us safe, because then somebody wouldn't say, oh, I didn't know that there was a policy or an ordinance, but there's nothing that should prohibit us from investigating, for Director Lauria to look into what is applicable in other places while we're putting, even with the ordinance, we're still going to need those signs there. Because then somebody won't say, I didn't know that this is the speed limit or that I have to do this. There's no sign. We are going to need those signs. So I would suggest that we start working on the sign and then, look at what ordinances, exist elsewhere or what is obtainable elsewhere, so that if we have to create an ordinance, we'll do that.
And then, do you want the same ordinance to apply to sidewalks?
Right.
Yeah, actually, that's
I would
even
think-
more dangerous.
I would think no, and the reason being, sidewalks are very thin. There's not the room to buzz someone usually.
You
We
can
already
still
look
get
at.
buzzed.
I mean, it's going to be a closer shave than on a trail and everything.
No, they have buzzed
my-
on sidewalks.
Yeah. Anyway, my point being.
When you say buzz, do you mean like clipped? Like somebody like hits you?
No, just, they go.
So working with sidewalks, I believe the bird scooters that we already have are not intended for sidewalks. I believe they're listed on them when you pull up the app and you ride them.
But the
they
city
say
ordinance allows them on sidewalks.
it does allow them on sidewalks. Gotcha. So that might be something that we look to update.
We need to rework.
I honestly think that this is a serious topic because e-bikes, scooters, they're becoming more and more people's primary form of transportation. It's not just recreation that we're talking about. It's actual just a transportation issue. And so they're good. I think they're a great form of transportation. They're cheap compared to buying a car. But and that's where I look at trails. And I don't look at the trails so much as like that, and that honestly has to be part of the conversation. When we look at the GKB trail that we're expanding, are we looking at it as a highway where people are going to be able to commute from Ithaca up to Mount Pleasant each day? Or are we looking at it as a recreation trail? Because 10, 15 years from now, we'll have more people doing that. So that's where even when we're talking about doing this trail through here, it's like there's a difference between people are going to start using this trail to, again, move north-south at rapid speeds because they have to get to work on time versus someone who is, I'm going to go out for a nice leisurely stroll and just take in the wildlife. So I do think that we really need to start considering of like not banning them from the city, but putting out restrictions on where we would like to see these. Again, if we can restrict some of the rentals, that cuts out pretty uneducated population from accessing areas. We hear reports of bird scooters ending up in the dam and everything because people just toss them into the river.
What?
Yeah, that happens. And so by taking if we again have an ordinance, then we can put into place sections of space where these scooters aren't allowed, for example. And yeah, there'll be people who violate it. Can't stop them all, but we can actually take policy steps.
Well, I believe we can also, because when you ride one of those bird scooters up to the line of CMU, they immediately drop in speed.
Right.
Yes.
We could set the GPS on them to drop speed within the parks. But just to answer your question on that, but what I'd like to look at, Director, is I'd like to know the 3 classes of e-bikes, how fast they go, and what requirements are for them, because there are 3 classes. And I know that in the state of Michigan, because I just pulled it up, only Class 1 electric bikes are allowed to ride on Michigan trails. Not Class 2 or 3. So those are things that we might want to keep in mind.
Director over there has his hand up.
Yes.
There is one caveat to that description. So the Class 1 can go up to 20 miles an hour. Class 2 and 3 can go up to 28 miles an hour. You can have a Class 2 or 3 bike if you have a disability.
Yes.
So I just wanted to put that out there too, that
Thank you.
there is a difference when you get into the state of Michigan. And they're also looking at ORV trails. So that's a little bit different than what we're talking, but
Yes.
it's the same concept.
My question was actually for Director Biscorner. Just, has there been discussion on this on the Parks Commission level?
So yes, what we all keep going back to is we do not have the staff to enforce it.
Right.
I mean, even police officers, you would have to add police officers if that's what you're going to do, so the difficulty comes down to enforcement.
I think there's another reason to look at an ordinance, and I think this might be what Commissioner Wingard was getting at, is that it also gives us a little bit of, if something were to happen, it's a little bit of CYA. So I kind of, I do think we might need to look at at least some ordinance changes, if not like a more, an introduction.
I think, Director Lauria, you already have in here that staff is preparing like definitions and of trails and e-bikes. Like, is that something you're already in the process of doing, or
Yeah.
after this conversation?
After this conversation, that's correct, sir.
Yeah, I would definitely want to update the ordinances. We have two separate ordinances. We have electric scooters / skateboards, and we have bikes as separate ordinances. Would it be worthwhile to combine the two? Again, if we're talking about non-motorized bikes, maybe keeping those as a separate ordinance, or that's a question I'm not certain on, but definitely expanding, we're gonna have to we should look to expand the definitions at the very least in our electric scooters and skateboards so we can start work on these, because again, it's an expanding field.
An e-bike can be used as a regular bike, so I think just might as well combine them. Because I feel like people will be like, well, I'm only pedaling it right now.
But they had the ability to turn on.
Right, but like you said, people aren't gonna have multiple different types of bikes. They're just gonna have one bike and use it different ways. So I feel like it might, for clarity, it might make sense just to put it all in one place, because I think overwhelmingly, the issue is speed.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what you're sitting on, it's speed.
Yeah. And I can keep my 1800cc Goldwing under 8 miles an hour.
And just so I'm clear, gas-powered, natural, or propane, anything that is
Propane.
out?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not propane bikes.
Who knows? Which is important because we need something on the books in regards to that, so.
Yeah.
I have a tangential thing. It feels like we're wrapping up, but it's kind of related, but I just wanted to throw it out there. For lithium batteries, I know that they cause quite a problem for the fire department. Is there, last I knew, there's the light bulbs and battery shop on the north side of Mission. They used to accept lithium batteries for recycling. They don't anymore. Do you know any place that does that? Or like if I had a lithium battery, like I had my e-bike, my lithium battery got cracked in a crash and everything, and now I'm like, I don't know what to do with this.
Have you brought it to Batteries Plus?
Oh, I don't actually have that, but I'm just.
Yeah, Batteries Plus.
On the north end of Mission?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one he.
Yeah, that's the one that they don't take lithium anymore.
Oh, they won't take lithium?
I found that out in the past week, yeah.
Yeah,
is it possible the city could look into a collection? Because if someone's like, hey, I have a lithium battery, it's about to blow, I feel like we should be prepared for that at the very least.
Is that something that the conservation district, don't they do that?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, because a couple times a year they do.
Like
they
at
do
the
tires
fairground?
and hazardous materials.
Yeah, they
And I
actually do.
and I feel like that might be part of that hazardous materials collection, which
Gotcha.
yeah, which
Do
I
they
think
do
is
that
normally in May.
throughout the year, or is it just?
No, it's only once a year is the thing.
Yeah, so if
I
it's
know,
only
I
once
know.
a year, you can't
I
really
know.
sit on something
I think
like
it's
that.
in May.
But maybe the fire, but I don't know. I don't want to sign the fire department up for more work, but
Just looking into it.
but yeah, maybe if it is a concern,
I mean, you could do it in the same way that, some cities have, containers, receptacles for drugs or needles, they'll say, hey, drugs that you don't want to use.
These things can start a building on fire. I don't know if a
I mean, I'm outside, I'm not saying, well, it's a receptacle. It's somewhere that you collect it.
Yeah.
It
All
could
right,
be a used
do we have what we want to give to? Okay, because we're kind of moving off into. Do we,
I think it's clear as mud, right?
yeah, I think it gives me a starting point, and I'm sure we'll
Bring it back.
obviously, we'll bring it back, and then we'll go through just like we did with the natural plan.
landscape.
Yes, so.
Okay.
Except not maybe a year's worth.
All right.
Stop
I will
joking.
entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I will second.
We have a
Oh
motion and
my
a second. All
God.
those in favor say yes.
Chapman.
Yes. All those opposed, no. We are adjourned at 9:18.
Chapman, you're on your own if you say no.